Exercise is super important. Everyone kind of knows that. I think finding an exercise routine that's you enjoy and that's fun for you is super important. It doesn't have to be going to the gym and getting like really ripped. It doesn't have to be long distance running. If running is scary to you, it can be like playing pickleball with friends or just walking and stretching and doing yoga. Or, yeah, if it has to be a social activity, make it a social activity. Call your friends on your walk. I think just finding something to get your body moving. And if you can be outside and get some fresh air and some vitamin D while you're doing that, I think that's even better too.
Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, where we talk about ideas for raising kids who become thriving adults, and we also talk about being thriving adults ourselves. I'm your host, Audrey Monkey. Here on the podcast, I share my experiences parenting 5 now adult kids and working with thousands more as a summer camp director for the past 4 decades. I'm the author of Happy Campers, and I love sharing encouragement and ideas for living more positive, connected lives. Topics I researched extensively for my master's in psychology and continue to explore today. I created this podcast as a place to share what I've learned and to encourage us all to raise and be thriving adults. Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. We're continuing the series called Tough Twenties. And today I have Charlotte back on again. Welcome back, Charlotte.
Thanks so much. Excited to be here.
So we have a survey going with questions from listeners. And one question that came in from a 23-year-old listener was, how to manage the transition from college to the quote real world. And that is such a huge question because there's so many different parts of life that you have to manage during big transitions. But we thought it would be good to focus on one specific area of that today, because I know for a lot of people, it's an area where there are struggles, and that is related to whether you're going from college to quote like independent living, or maybe you're just going from any other situation to independent living, or sort of on your own, having to start manage your eating, your sleeping, your health, all those things. It can be challenging. So Charlotte has a background. She mentioned in the first podcast that we talked. Just Charlotte, why don't you tell a little bit about sort of the training that you received about health and nutrition. And then I'm just going to have you share your ideas about how people can think about foundational habits or things that they might want to practice or start trying to do once they're in charge of their own health.
I am a certified holistic health coach. I did a program through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, and the program really focused on the nutrition that we eat, obviously, but it also was about your relationships, your finances, your spirituality, and all those other things that come together to make you a healthy, happy human. So that's kind of what I'm really passionate about focusing on, is finding how you can be your healthiest self in every meaning of that word. So yeah, I'd love to share a few of my easy tips for transition. I'll just jump right in. I think sleep, like you mentioned, is super important. In college, if you're coming from college, or even high school, if you're living under your parents' roof, you might have a bedtime, or you might have some sort of structure, or you have no structure and it doesn't really matter because you have no job to report to. But I think getting at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep is super important for health, in terms of how you feel, just being able to work your hardest throughout the day, but also in terms of your mood. You're way more likely to be depressed or anxious if you're not getting full night's rest.
Topic of sleep. You have said it's so fundamental, and people, I think, especially when a lot of college students don't get enough sleep. And it's just kind of a, like you said, they have a little more time usually to catch up when you're a
Mhm.
college student, because like you said, maybe you only, you have a couple days a week where your classes start later or you can sleep in. But generally, once you're out in the adult world, you don't have that option of sleeping in or catching up as much. Another thing that I learned from one of somebody that I've had on my podcast, Laura Vanderkam, she does all these studies on how people use their time. And it's always surprising because people's perception of, for example, how many hours they're working is usually incorrect.
Totally.
Also, with sleep, people who say, oh, I only need 6 hours of sleep, what they do is they might have like this schedule of 6 hours of sleep all during the week. And then on the weekend, they'll sleep 9 or 10 hours. So there's like, when you average it out, it's true that most everybody needs, like you said, at least 7 hours. A lot of us need 8 or even 8.5. So that was really interesting to me, to learn, because I always thought, oh, well, some people just can get away with less sleep, and they can. I think it varies a little bit, but not as much as people think. So you end up catching up, but it's much better for you to be on a little bit more of a regular kind of sleep wake up schedule. It just like your body gets more used to it. So yes, sleep is
Mhm.
super important. And it's one of those things that I think as a kid, you're just like, you want to stay up later. And you like think that
You
that's like
hate
that's
naps. At
you
least for
hate,
me, I hated naps. It was like punishment to go to sleep. Now
yeah,
I'm like, it's time to get in bed.
I know. Oh, so true. Laura Vanderkam says that going to bed early is sleeping in for adults.
It's so true.
Right. So it's like the only way that you can get that feeling of like, oh, I just can get all the sleep I need is by going to bed earlier once you're an adult. So, anyway, so sleep, I think that's one of those kind of foundational health habits that if people only do one thing, I think figuring that out would be huge.
It's huge. And I think a lot of times the healthy aesthetic people are aiming for right now is like going to the gym and waking up super early sometimes, which is good and healthy for a lot of people. But I'm of the camp that it's more important to sleep in if you're behind on sleep than work out. And you shouldn't be working out if you're super sleepy, especially if you're a woman for hormone purposes. So I think it's a little different with men and women because men are just on the circadian rhythm and women are on that and they have another cycle going. So there's more factors at play. But something else sleep wise, I was thinking is when you aren't sleeping as much, your body's producing this hormone called ghrelin at a much higher rate. And that's the hormone that signals to your body that you're hungry. So you end up overeating and then that makes you sleepier. So it's just kind of an ongoing, like cyclical thing. If you're making poor eating decisions, it might not be like your willpower. It could be that you just need more sleep.
Super critical. And this is for people of all ages, by the way, not just young adults. We all have this same thing. And also, like that late afternoon, like that's kind of my slump time. That's when like my urges to go like get some random snack, usually a carb. Like that's kind of
Yeah.
like what my brain feels like it wants. It's like the time of day where I'm like, oh, like a little piece of chocolate or something like that. So
And
it's
that's probably
interesting.
the worst snack you can grab when you are tired. And another thing we reach for is coffee and caffeine. And we live in a very caffeine dependent place. A lot of us love our coffee, but that's also just masking like your symptoms of tiredness and things like that. And if you're tired and your body's telling you that, you probably need more rest. You don't need more coffee. It's kind of a band aid for the issue.
Right. Yeah, I do love that Band-Aid, but I have been pretty consistent about not doing coffee after noon.
Yeah, that's the perfect cutoff. If you can stop then it's better for your night's sleep for sure.
All right. So we tackled sleep, young adults out there, old adults out there, anybody out there. Are you getting enough sleep? Because like Charlotte said, that's probably that's foundational to kind of a lot of other areas of your well-being. So that's, I think, as you're tackling managing your own health and adulthood, sleep is an important thing to master.
Definitely. And then general nutrition is obviously super important. And I know people know to eat their vegetables. I would say a lot of people get that, but there are other health tips I'd like to share that I think are kind of easy and for people to implement. The first one is eating breakfast. I think a lot of people skip this meal, but from a blood sugar, like stabilizing that point of view, your cortisol is going to spike like crazy if you're not eating breakfast. And then you're going to be on a roller coaster of cortisol throughout the day, up and down, instead of that straight flat line, how you want your cortisol to be. So eating breakfast is a good way to like set the tone for the day. And that breakfast should include at least 20 grams of protein, but ideally more, and as high as like 50 grams of protein if you're a bigger person. And that goes for every meal. Every meal should incorporate, in addition to carbs and fat, at least 30-ish grams of protein. And I think that's something a lot of people forget.
So,
Yeah,
question about that, just for people who maybe don't really want to go in and like figure out what that is. What is like 20 grams of protein at breakfast look like? What is that? What's a good, like, easy one to do if you're not a big cook or you don't, want to make it easy?
it's more than you would think. An egg has about 7 grams of protein. So that's 3 eggs. And I know a lot of people are like, that sounds like a lot, at least for girls, but that's what we need. And cup of Greek yogurt is really great. That can be up to like 20 grams in a cup of Greek yogurt. Yeah, you can. People put hard-boiled eggs on their Greek yogurt with everything but the bagel seasoning. I think it's like a savory dish. Protein smoothies are good. The protein powder is not as it's not as absorbed as well by your body, but it's still a great way to get protein. I also sometimes put some collagen in my coffee if I don't feel like I'm quite getting enough protein or I'm not really in the mood to eat. But if you can wait to have your first cup of coffee till after you eat, that's also ideal, especially for women.
Yeah. So this breakfast thing is really timely for me because I've been for like earlier this year, I was doing Noom to try to lose some weight. And breakfast is one of their main things that they talk about. And they talk about it like they don't really talk about the cortisol, like you were saying, but it makes you, I guess it sets you up for the rest of the day sort of healthier too, because you're then not as hungry for lunch. And, I don't know how it works, but for me, it's so much better. But right now, like this fasting, intermittent fasting is all the rage.
Mhm.
And I mean, I don't know if you know that much about it, but I'm just curious. I know that for me, that's not a good choice. I did that accidentally by working too much and not like I would go till 2 p.m. without eating a lot of days. And it didn't work out for me because it wasn't like I kept weight the same or anything like that. It's better for me to like eat my meals.
Yeah, I think it's a way of under eating, and it can be a little bit of disordered eating in disguise because you're just skipping meals. And it's a lot of studies have proven it does work better for men, that there
Mhm.
could be some benefits for men, but it is absolutely terrible for women and our bodies. So I need to look into that more, but I don't think that's very healthy.
Yeah. Okay. So breakfast, that's a nutritional thing that I think, they always say that they used to say it's the most important meal of the day. And maybe it
It
really
is.
is.
In an ideal world, your breakfast would be the biggest, or actually your lunch and your dinner would be like smaller because you've been fueling so well throughout the day. But that's hard because I love dinner and I know a lot of people do.
Well, and it's like tends to be for me, it's like the time that if you're going out, that's when you're going out and you have more time for it. So it seems to be like it ends up for me always being the biggest meal, even though maybe it's not. But earlier maybe is better too. I don't know. Okay. So what's next? What do you have next for us?
Okay, just general blood sugar level management, the cortisol. If you can start your meal with something savory and like ideally a vegetable or something like a leafy green, then your blood sugar is going to be way more managed afterwards. And then eat your protein and then eat your carb. So I think like it instead of going straight for your pasta or your mashed potatoes, if you're having that with chicken and broccoli, if you can eat the broccoli first and then the chicken and then the pasta, then that's really ideal. And it's also better for like your cravings later on. You're less likely to crave like sweets.
Oh, I'd never learned that. So like kind of the vegetable leafy thing first.
Yes, if you can.
Okay.
You can't. Something
Right.
easy you can do is have some, which isn't very delicious, but you can have some apple cider vinegar in water, or like you like to do, mom, a carrot salad, like some apple cider vinegar on carrots and salt and pepper and olive oil. That is also going to help you regulate, or going on a walk before, or going on a walk after. Those are
Hmm.
all things you can do.
Okay. Great. That's funny because you know how some people like to eat their meals like one section at a time on their plate.
Yeah.
I'm like a glop it all together kind of
I'm kind
person.
of a glopper too, but I try to have a few veggies before
Yeah.
I begin my glop.
Right. Okay. Okay. Good tip. Good tip.
Exercise is super important. Everyone kind of knows that. I think finding an exercise routine that's you enjoy and that's fun for you is super important. It doesn't have to be going to the gym and getting like really ripped. It doesn't have to be long distance running. If running is scary to you, it can be like playing pickleball with friends, or just walking, and stretching and doing yoga. Or, yeah, if it has to be a social activity, make it a social activity. Call your friends on your walk. I think just finding something to get your body moving. And if you can be outside and get some fresh air and some vitamin D while you're doing that, I think that's even better too.
That's awesome. And I think, what about, I know people sometimes feel like, oh, I don't have enough time for exercise. What are some suggestions for the people who are just like, they feel like overwhelmed by the idea of like adding another big thing? What are some tips for just maybe a little bit, not here and there, or how can people get some exercise enough for a day?
Yeah, you can definitely start slow, adding it in. If you can walk to work, that's awesome, or bike to work. If you can step outside for 20 minutes during the workday and just get a few steps in, or stretch while you're watching TV, I think that's great too. Um, yeah.
Somebody I work with, he takes the first half of his lunch. We get an hour and he takes the first half and goes for a walk and then comes back and has lunch.
Hmm. I'd
So
also say about the not having time, we all are allotted, 24 hours in the day. And we're choosing how we spend each one and every one of those hours. And we're all kind of busy in a sense in our own way. We can make ourselves busy. But, what are you doing in some of those hours that you could maybe cut back on slightly? Like if you're watching TV for an hour or two or five every night, I think one of those could maybe be allotted towards some movement.
or you can do that thing where you what's it called? It's called not habit bundling, but where you pair one habit that you want to do with something that you really like to do. So like
Mm,
for me, I remember there was a time where I really liked the TV series This Is Us, and I would only watch it walking on the treadmill.
yeah,
So it's
that's
like I don't really like walking on a treadmill. I'd rather go outside, but if it's like winter or whatever, but I would be like looking forward to watching the episode. And I knew
so,
there was a new one out there. So it would get me on the treadmill. So it's like you kind of like trick yourself into thinking, like, oh, like you were saying, stretching. It could be that, oh, I'm going to watch this next episode, 25-minute episode on Netflix while stretching.
yeah. Or listen to a podcast on a walk,
Right.
or a book on tape.
Yeah,
Yeah, or talking to people. If you're going to call your friend, you might as well get some steps in.
for sure. Yeah.
You
Maybe
want
you
to
could
hit a
both,
plank while it's on a commercial break? Hit a plank.
oh my gosh, a plank for every
Make
commercial
your
break would be long.
roommates do it with you.
Have a competition.
Yeah,
That's super fun.
just make it fun.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, just health related, just sort of tips? I think one of the things I know, and I don't know if this is maybe a whole nother episode, is just some people really don't have any cooking skills.
Mm.
I guess maybe we should do another episode just talking about what are some just like basic things that
How to
people,
roast
right.
vegetables.
Yeah.
101.
Right. That was like, to me, like roasted vegetables taste so much better. Like figuring that out really went a long way of making me enjoy
Yeah.
vegetables
Like
more.
stop steaming your broccoli.
Yeah.
That
Ugh.
in the oven.
Yeah.
I would say one thing I feel like is super important to think about coming out of college is your drinking habits and alcohol. I mean, and weed or whatever else you've maybe been doing in college. I think it's time to maybe reevaluate if you're like struggling with that in college, or if it doesn't matter as much, like your sleep schedule doesn't matter as much. You're not feeling the repercussions as much, or you have time to just be lazy or hungover. Um, Alcohol can really ruin sleep. And we just talked about how important sleep is. So that's something to consider. It's also, if you're drinking, you probably are not going to be as inclined to exercise the next day. And then you're going to be more inclined to eat unhealthy. So I think it's all kind of factors into the other healthy tips I shared. And I think drinking can be fun for like social bonding and getting together with friends. It's not all terrible, but I think it's important to um, evaluate what your relationship with alcohol is.
Yeah, I think, one of the things I think it's really hard because I think most people have seen it modeled that like every social gathering
Mhm.
revolves around
You have to be
alcohol or
simple.
fun in quotes is like always has to be paired with it. And I do think that that's a really good skill to learn as an adult. And a lot of people need to learn it is what else fun can you do that
Totally.
doesn't have to entail, like you were talking about pickleball, but just also like getting together and chatting with friends. You
Mhm.
can try having a cup of
Really
tea
nice.
instead, or,
Yeah.
do some, just like try doing some different things. At camp, we have one of our things for all of our staff is we ask them not to drink or use any substances for the whole summer, just for many reasons, and that we're all living together. It's limited time off. Coming back hungover from a day off would be terrible for your performance as a counselor. That's very intense and requires a lot of energy. And it's interesting because, I witness firsthand how much fun everyone's having all summer. But the thing that's unique is that everyone else around you is doing the same thing. So that's where the difference when you get out in, you're not at camp,
Not
you're
to
not in this
mention
bubble.
you remember everything a lot more clearly.
Wow. Yeah.
Like those are things you don't want to forget. And a lot of times when you're drinking, you're having fun with your friends and you don't want to forget that either.
Yeah. And you
I
don't
also
just want
think
to,
people are, it's peer pressure. Even if you're like a pretty confident person, it does feel a little weird sometimes to not drink. But I found when I'm not in the mood to drink and say no, they're like, wow, how do you say no? Like other people are jealous. So I
mm,
think you just got to own it when you're not feeling it or when you're feeling in the mood to prioritize your health in that way. That it's totally fun and fine.
I think that's actually, you just hit on something kind of important as an adult. One of the things is just to like kind of decide, like, don't
Mhm.
let the world decide what you're doing. So you get to decide when you're sleeping or how, your sleep
Yeah.
routine, like
Yeah. If you
even
have to
getting a,
go leave
yeah,
early, that's
right.
okay. I'm a
Yeah.
function.
Right. Like if you need to say, oh, you know what, on Tuesday nights, I get home by 10 or whatever you want, whatever you want to do. And all of these things, but again, require a little bit of thinking about ahead of time. Like if you are valuing your health or trying for a season to really make sure you get enough sleep so you can get up and do some exercise before work or whatever it is you decide to do, like don't let everybody else change your
Totally.
decisions.
I've also like been on friend trips where nobody's eating breakfast or there's just not as much eating going on as I like to eat. And I go out of my way to find food. Like I don't have to not eat because someone else is, or I don't have to have a bagel with everyone else. I can get some eggs on my bagel and get some protein. Like it's easy little adjustments, but I think like you said, just finding out what works best for you and what makes you feel best and then sticking to it, just being confident in your plan for health.
Yeah, I think part of it, I don't know if this is just a female thing or not, but I always didn't want to like rock the boat too much or be like
Yeah,
like a pain or need something different. So
totally.
that's always a little bit of a thing. Like if you're really focusing on your health, sometimes it does require you to like bring your own food or drink or not have what everyone else is having or just pass on a dessert or whatever it is. And it's like without feeling, and people will, there's a weird thing about,
The
especially,
same as drinking, they'll make you feel
yeah,
bad if you say
yeah,
no to a dessert.
right. Yeah. And it's weird about, especially with alcohol, how I think there's this weird element of people feel better when everyone else is doing it too.
Totally. Yeah.
So it is like it's a little bit different to sometimes just say, oh, I'm just having sparkling water tonight, or I'm having a kombucha, or whatever it is that you're doing. But it is true, like be true to yourself. Like if you know that you want to feel better the next day or you want to get a good night's sleep or whatever. Anyway, but that comes down to more than health, right? It's more like your self image and your ability to sort of confidently make choices that might be different from the rest of the crowd.
Definitely.
All right. We've talked for quite some time. I'm not exactly sure how long, but anything else that you want to share regarding kind of health and as you transition to adulting that you've learned or advice you would give to someone who's like brand new out struggling in this adulting sphere?
I would say learn to cook, like you were saying, some really basic healthy meals. I think that's a good way to kick off your nutrition. Maybe eating out a little less and door dashing a little less if possible. The food you cook, you know everything that's going into it, and it's probably going to be healthier for you. A pasta you order online versus like a pasta that you make at home is so different. A lot of those, like even calorically, have like 2,000 calories, and you wouldn't even know. I would also say for the people that are like super hyper focused on what they're eating, that a lot of times it's totally okay to eat a cookie, and like that's part of health and happiness, or have a drink is like friendship and like your connections you're making with people. So it's important to focus on your nutrition and health, but it's more important to not be anxious about the nutritional decisions you're making. And I know that's hard for some people, especially for, I think, more so for females.
Yeah.
To not put too much pressure on yourself to be the perfect, healthy ideal. I think that's pretty important.
There's enough pressure on us for so many other areas. And it's like unattainable, whatever this perfection that's out there that someone says. Another thing that I've learned is just think about adding instead of taking things away. So instead of saying like, I am not going to have dessert or I'm never drinking again, or these really crazy things, just be like, I'm going to drink my full water bottle. I'm going to fill it twice a day and drink this much water every day, or I'm going to get this much sleep, or I'm going to read this much of a book. It's like adding things in feels better than taking things away.
Yeah. Toss a little arugula on your pizza.
Yeah. Have that pizza with some arugula on the side. Are you supposed to eat the arugula off the top first before you eat the pizza though? Because it's
maybe, but don't get stressed about it. It's fine.
Okay. Well, Charlotte, thank you for these health habits. I think this managing the transition goes a lot more. We need to delve deeper. And I've gotten some questions about this too. The transition work-wise is a big question for a lot of people, and career and sort of life.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It needs many episodes. And there's some people that I want to talk to, especially some people who didn't go to college, chose some different routes that we'll talk to on the series too, because like the path is different for everybody. And that part of it is just like figuring out, there's like sometimes this rough patch of figuring out, well, which one is right for me. So we'll be talking about that too, this managing the transition. But I really think that having some foundational health habits is a big part of kind of all the other things coming together.
Yes.
Better.
It's one thing you can somewhat control.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for being on again, Charlotte. I'm sure you'll be back for more episodes. And listeners, thanks for being with us for the Tough 20s series. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. As always, you can find notes and links about this episode on my website at sunshine-parenting.com. If you enjoyed the episode, I'd appreciate you passing it along to a friend or giving Sunshine Parenting a rating and review on iTunes. If you enjoy listening to my voice talking to you, my book, Happy Campers, 9 Summer Camp Secrets for Raising Kids Who Become Thriving Adults, is now available on Audible. Thanks for listening and have a great rest of your day. Here's to raising a generation of thriving adults and being a generation of thriving adults.